Welcome to Respectfully. I am your host, King CJ, and over here, I speak raw, real, unfiltered, unedited boxing talk. Please subscribe to my channel. Please comment, thumb it up, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let's get into it.
Derek, who's the better puncher when it goes down? Crawford got 10 knockouts in a row, but Spence looks like the heavy-handed, natural.
10 knockouts in a row against who?
Right hook, uppercut, sends him back. Another left hand and a knockdown score. Let's see what Crawford does with it. Here he comes, backs him up with a left hand again. Horns in the corner, uppercut lands. Crawford on the attack. That's it. Crawford gets expected to be. He is. What a shoot. His combinations. Oh, he scores a knockdown. Holding along.
And another big left hand from Kavalauskas, and he's hurt, and he's got hit by a big right, and down goes.
There's no shot. Oh, big right hook.
Drops Kavalauskas. Here we go again. Big shot from Crawford.
5.
And that is in the show in round 4.
I think it was a right hook as
Crawford looks to finish. Big shot from Crawford.
Down scored in round 10 by the champ. Overhand right and another combination. Beautiful work by Crawford. As it's over.
I've noticed that the boxing community has become a place where everyone just regurgitates the same talking points from, people that you respect in the game. The YouTube boxing community is kind of a bit on the toxic side. And when I say that, this is what I mean by that. We are to the point where most fans of boxing comes to the YouTube boxing community, and you have your top channels. Me personally, I like the smaller boxing channels because I feel personally that they keep things a lot real. I feel like they're trying to build up their brand, and they don't want to do that by trying to imitate the huge boxing channels. But getting back to the fans, most of them gravitate to your big YouTubers, your Boxing Egos, what's the weird looking guy, Blue Blood, 78 Sports TV, Black Fight Fan. I don't know if I said Ego already. If there's anybody else, I'm not intentionally leaving them out. I just can't think of it. None of these channels that I've mentioned that I follow. As stated before, I do follow the smaller boxing channels. They do keep it a lot more real on their channels. There are some bias, but there's biases on all sides. We all have the boxers that we personally like. But me, I'm more of a fan of the sport of boxing than of any particular fighter. So I feel like it was a good time for me to jump into this YouTube boxing community. Hopefully you guys will subscribe to my channel, mess with my content. But this is my first video, so this is trial and error. Might not be the voice that you're used to, but I guarantee I'll be the one that you know later on. But let's get into it. Derek James last night in a post-fight interview, he posed a question that you've seen at the beginning of this video. And that, it bothers me because in my personal opinion, Earl Spence Jr. built his brand up fighting a bunch of guys that we don't know. The Ocampos of the world, the Bundus, the Van Herten. Those were fights that he won and showed separation in and looked great doing it. And we praised him for it. And then when he finally got his first real test, which was a Kell Brook, it was a fight. It was a fight. Kell Brook was damaged goods, in my opinion, coming off of the loss to Triple G at a higher weight, having to squeeze back down to 147 pounds to fight this young, hungry lion. And that's what Earl is. He's a lion. Take nothing away from the brother. But he built his names before getting to the Kell Brook fight off of names like that. Lamont Peterson, you know, a blown up lightweight. He was not a welterweight for real, for real. Mikey Garcia, not a real welterweight. You know, but these are names from the old regime that help you get your name out there. So, you know, when a fighter's on the come up, we don't care. Similar to what Boots Ennis just did to Thomas Delorme. Delorme for Boots is a fighter from the old regime, and if you can beat him and look good, someone who is a seasoned fighter, you know, it brings buzz to your name. This is how this is how it goes in boxing. We all know this, right? So when you have a trainer like Derek James say, well, who has he knocked out? That irks me. It gets under my skin because it diminishes the sport of boxing to fans who may not know them. And let me give you a quick analogy. You have a LeBron James on the team, right? He plays for the Lakers. But on that same Lakers squad, you have a lesser known player. I don't even know who's on the roster, so I can't even give you a name. But we have someone down the line on the roster that's not as good enough, but he's still on the team and he still makes a contribution to the team. Does that make sense? So getting back, when Derek James says, well, who did he knock out? Well, he's knocked out everybody that he's faced at the welterweight limit. That's why I put those clips in there. I didn't have to dig back to, you know, him going undisputed in, you know, in the junior welterweight division. I didn't have to put any of those clips in there because it makes no never mind. What he's done at welterweight. Just what he's done at welterweight. We can line that up with Earl Spence, what he's done at welterweight and how he built his name. And here's a guy who's, you know, been in the division for the least amount of time as all the players that's up there. He's been there how many years now? Terrence Crawford has been at the welterweight division for how many years now? He fought Jeff Warren back when? When was the Jeff Warren fight? Let me look that up. Hold on. Excuse me while I look this up. Because this matters. It does. This matters. So I'm going to pull this up right now on the computer. We have, what was that? When was that? 2018. Sorry about that. Should have had my facts together before I started speaking. But 2018 is when he fought Jeff Warren. We're talking about 5 years, maybe a little less than 5 years that Terrence Crawford has been at the welterweight division. And in my opinion, from a guy who's marched up 3 weight classes, I think he's doing pretty well at the welterweight limit, considering the fact he's only been there for 5 years. Everyone else at the division has been there for years, had time to grow, and have not accomplished what he's accomplished in terms of knocking out each opponent and being right in line to fight for an undisputed fight with Earl Spence, praying that everything goes well. But my problem with what Derek James said, for real, is why doesn't Terrence Crawford get the credit that he deserves for moving up in weight, getting acclimated into the weight, and stopping everybody that he does? And if Derek James was trying to insinuate that, hey, you know, these guys that he's knocked out at the welterweight division, they're nobodies. They're bums, or they were fighters on their way out, or whatever it is that you want to say. It is still hard to stop every single opponent that you have faced, bum or not. Old fighter on their way out or not. Old veterans are crafty. Not everybody that's on their way out of fighting has lost a step or two or is just completely done. That's not the case. Floyd Mayweather retired, dusting off the younger Andre Berto. You know what I mean? It's been other fighters who've walked off into Andre Ward. You know, he walked off to the sunset too. You know, he had lost a little bit, but he did what he did and he left the sport. Just because you're leaving the sport doesn't mean that you're damaged goods or you're just completely finished. Some of these guys can still compete. They're just opting to turn the page on the next chapter of their life. And to diminish a W is crazy. And not only that, like, think about this. just because you don't know someone, it doesn't make them a bum. It makes you a bum because you're supposed to be a fan of this sport. And if you're a true fan of the sport, you should know who's in there, what belts the champions carry, who's in those top 10 rankings to face off for that belt. You should know this. You should know these fighters. You should know who's in the welterweight division, from the top dogs to the little dogs, because everybody's on the come up. Mean Machine, he was not a bum. And just with some simple research, you can literally see, like, the man had a great decorated amateur background. He had never been knocked out. He was undefeated. He was ranked in the WBO rankings at the time of the fight. But he's a bum because y'all don't know him. But I would put Mean Machine against Ocampo, the Lamont Peterson that had faced Spence, Danny Garcia. I will put Kavaliauskas in there with a lot of those guys, and I think he has a chance to win, or he will win. It's not a guaranteed wash. It's just not. It's not a foregone conclusion that all Spence opposition would beat Terrence Crawford. I don't believe that. He faced a weight bully in Jose Benavidez, a rivalry fight, by the way. This man is like, what, almost 6 feet tall or 6 feet tall, big as shit. Was undefeated. And again, I want to stress this. It was a rivalry fight. This is somebody who had been calling him out, has been speaking bad upon his name, and he gave him a shot and an opportunity at the belt. That's to be commended and respected, not diminished. What type of fan are you where you can kind of discredit and diminish a person's accomplishments? I'm waiting because I really want to know who's these fans of the sport who will diminish a W. If you're watching basketball and the Golden State Warriors at the peak, at they highlight when they had the best record in the NBA, they still had to face the team with the worst record in the NBA. You still had to match off, and those aren't always blowout victories. Sometimes you just win by a couple of points. Because on any given night, a person can show up and show out. And we have to start giving these fighters respect. And let's just say, for argument purposes, everyone that Terrence Crawford has faced at the welterweight division has been bums. Let's say that. Let's say that, right? They're bums, right? It's not a foregone conclusion that you can knock out these bums. He's stopping these guys. He's showing separation in who they are and who he is, what skill sets they bring to the table and the skill sets that he brings to the table. He's showing a separation and he's stopping them. Ain't no guarantee that you can stop a bum. What are you talking about? It's been people who's been in. Remember when what's the big guy named Tyson Fury? Remember when Tyson Fury faced off against what's that guy's name? Waling? No one knew who the fuck that was. I didn't. Did you? No one knew who he was. Came in there and gave Fury a tough fight. You can't sleep on people because you don't know them. And you can't diminish a person's victories. And I'm sick of these bigger boxing channels pushing that narrative. And that's what they do. Because behind the scenes, they want to have interviews with the boxers. They want to talk to the trainers. They want to massage these relationships. So they don't want to be completely honest with you all. And then they also know algorithms and, what the people want to hear. So they start catering to their constituents. Oh, well, my people want to hear me talk bad about Crawford. So that's just what I'm going to do because I'm going to rack the views up. I'm going to please my audience. That's how this is. It's a game. In no way, shape, or form do you watch a Terrence Crawford fight and watch an Errol Spence fight and say, oh, man, well, Errol Spence guy, he big. And he going to beat him because he big and he just too strong. And then you watch the guy fight and he's throwing 821 punches, 600, 900, throwing all these punches and not getting the stoppages. Terrence Crawford is a little bit more economical with his punch and have stopped every single one of them. So when we say, oh, he's big, he's strong, I don't want to hear that. Mean Machine was strong. Benavidez was big. What did that mean? Sean Porter was a tough guy, never been stopped, was stopped regardless of what him and his father was going through. We all seen where that fight was going, regardless of the daddy threw in the towel or not. We knew where that was going. It was blood in the water. And it was a shark out there circling. That's the facts. That is not an opinion. That is the facts. There needs to be more respect on Terrence Crawford's name. Hell, Errol Spence needs the respect that he deserves as well. But we don't have to give respect to one by diminishing the other. Let's just praise both guys and hope for a good fight. And Derek James, for you to sit here and say, I don't watch Terrence Crawford fights, you, sir, are a liar. I know y'all watching those fights. He's been calling you out. He's been on y'all heels for 5 years now. You've seen him fight. You know what he can do. Stop playing these games. Stop trying to pump Errol Spence's head up and get y'all ass in the game, because if you come in that fight thinking that Terrence Crawford is just athletic, your man is going to be stopped. And that's the truth. Terrence Crawford can box. He can fight. He has dog in him. He's a switch hitter. He has beautiful timing. And one thing that people do not talk about is his punches in between your punches. He can do everything. You know what they never say about Terrence Crawford? Well, styles make fights. They don't say that about Terrence Crawford. Why? Because his adaptability. Look at every single clip that I've put in here and go back and watch those fights and tell me. You tell me if he fights each guy the same way, because he doesn't. He adapts to what the other guy is doing and he starts exploiting those things. But I can point to a lot of Errol Spence fights where it's the same thing. Let me walk down and mow down and throw a whole bunch of, he's a volume puncher. He's gonna walk you down and throw a whole bunch of shots. And he's there to be hit, and he's not very fast. And I think that the Terrence Crawford matchup personally is all wrong for Errol. I really do. But you never know, because it is boxing. And Errol Spence is a solid fighter, and I'm taking nothing away from the brother. But when it comes down to the fight happening and people start these betting odds and stuff like that, Terrence Crawford will be favored. And the smart money will be putting it on Crawford because he's the smart choice. Errol Spence is good. But it's something about Earl's, like, how can I say this? Like, when I'm watching Earl fight, I am like, it's exciting, it's great, but there is this vulnerability in the air that I don't think gets talked about enough as it pertains to Errol Spence Jr. It's like I watch him fight and I'm like, dude, like, the right person, the right one can touch you up and hurt you. And then when I look back at all his fights, I'm noticing a trend with the high guard defense, the slow feet. And I'm sitting here looking at these fights and I'm like, these are really smart matchup and showcase fights for Errol Spence. The opposition always got some type of slow feet, the high guard type defense, or he's just flat out bigger and stronger and can impose his will. I do not believe this will be the case as he faced off against Terrence Crawford. And I don't care what anybody said, that fight against Ugas, Spence was looking a bit discouraged in some of those rounds, and he was hurt a lot to the body. And this is the second time I've seen him drop his mouthpiece and look confused as he was buzzed or hurt. And I don't know if that's just a coinky dink or if this is a theme with this man. But I wish him nothing but the best. I hope the fight goes off without a hitch. But Derek James, you a sucker. And all you other big YouTube boxing channels, y'all suckers too for not keeping it real with the boxing fans. And y'all are actually helping destroy and diminish the sport of boxing, because it always has to be one killer at a time for y'all. It's one person in every division that we just want to praise, and the other person will diminish them, even though we know that they're obviously good. And like I said earlier in the video, You need some of these other fighters that are like you need Sean Porters of the world. You need those type of fighters. You need the Thurmans of the world. You need more than just the PBC stable. You need a lot of fighters in the division to make it pop. And you need a lot of up-and-comers from the junior welterweight division. Like, you need them. Like, it's absolutely needed. And we need to stop diminishing these guys, and we need to start learning who they are and what they're capable of. And understand that styles do make fights. Do your research, do your due diligence, and be a fan of boxing. Do not be a fanatic of a person, because that's worshiping the idol. And your Lord and Savior told you how that goes. Don't worship idols and things like that. It's okay to like a person. It's okay to be a fan of a person. But when you become a fanatic, that is something completely different. You're obviously being biased. You obviously are not admitting to a person's flaws, what they are, or what they're not capable of. So let's make this sport back, and let's take it back to what it used to be. Exciting and fun to watch, because we knew these guys and we praised these guys, and we didn't think that losses was the end of the world. We didn't think that being knocked down meant that you didn't have a chin. Like, what I see in today's boxing and these fans is crazy, and I see the boxing channels are the ones that's perpetuating this, because fans are fickle. And you know, if you can capture the mind of a person, you can sit here and say anything, and they'll just keep running with it and regurgitating the same crap and foolishness that you're repeating. So do this sport a service, not a disservice, and help make the sport bigger. Not just a person, but the actual sport. Because at the end of the day, Earl Spence might be slightly more popular than Terrence Crawford, but they are in the same ballpark figure. Floyd Mayweather was out of this world in popularity, but Manny Pacquiao was right up under. Terrence Crawford and Earl Spence names are synonymous with one another. You can't mention one without mentioning the other. So I don't want to hear how big one fighter is and how much more important this fighter is. No, I don't want to hear that. I understand that. I understand how the boxing game works. I get it. Asses in seats. We get it. We get it. But Derrick James, what you did at that post-fight interview was some sucker shit. And be better next time, brother. Be better. Y'all take it easy. This is my channel. Respectfully, I want y'all to subscribe. I want y'all to comment. I want you to share. I want you to do all that shit that everybody else tell you to do. Do that for me. Please help blow up my channel. I'll holler at y'all. Respect.